Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and each day I invite you to join me as we reflect on a significant moment from our shared past. Today is November 24th, and we're looking back 166 years to November 24th, 1859. On that day, a London publisher released a book with the rather unwieldy title On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. The author was Charles Darwin, a 50-year-old naturalist who had spent decades carefully gathering evidence for a theory that would revolutionize not just biology, but our entire understanding of life on Earth. The first printing of 1,250 copies sold out on the first day. This wasn't just because of clever marketing or controversy, though controversy would certainly follow. The book sold because Darwin had amassed overwhelming evidence for a profound insight. Species were not fixed and unchanging as most people believed. Still, they had evolved over vast periods of time through a process he called natural selection. Life's diversity arose not from separate acts of creation, but from common ancestry and gradual modification. The implications were staggering. If Darwin was right, humans weren't separate from nature, but part of it, shaped by the same forces that shaped every other living thing. The Origin of Species didn't just change biology, it changed philosophy, religion, politics, and how humans understood their place in the universe. And 166 years later, we're still grappling with its implications and still fighting about its teaching. Darwin's path to publication was anything but quick. He had been sitting on his theory for over 20 years, gathering evidence, conducting experiments, and building an overwhelming case before going public. The foundation was laid during his voyage on HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836. As the ship's naturalist, the young Darwin observed variations in species across different environments, finches with different beak shapes on different Galapagos islands, fossils of extinct South American mammals that resembled modern species, and the geographic distribution of similar but distinct species. These observations planted questions that would occupy him for decades. After returning to England, Darwin began developing his theory. The key insight came from reading Thomas Malthus's essay on population, which argued that organisms produce more offspring than can survive given limited resources. Darwin realized that this created competition, and any variation providing an advantage in that competition would be more likely to be passed to the next generation. Over many generations, this process, natural selection, could produce substantial change. By 1844, Darwin had written a substantial essay outlining his theory, but he didn't publish. He feared the religious controversy his ideas would provoke. He wanted more evidence. He spent years studying barnacles, conducting breeding experiments with pigeons, and corresponding with farmers and breeders worldwide. He was methodical, cautious, and thorough to the point of obsession. Then, in June 1858, Darwin received a letter that changed everything. Alfred Russel Wallace, a younger naturalist working in the Malay archipelago, had independently arrived at the same theory. Wallace's letter outlined natural selection clearly and asked Darwin to review it. Darwin was devastated. 20 years of work, and someone else had reached the same conclusion. Darwin's friends arranged a joint presentation of both men's work to the Linnean Society in July 1858. But Wallace was still overseas and had written just an essay. Darwin had volumes of evidence. His friends urged him to write a book immediately. Darwin worked frantically, calling his book an abstract of his larger work, though it would run to over 500 pages. 13 months later, On the Origin of Species was published. The Origin of Species presented several revolutionary ideas, supported by extensive evidence from geology, paleontology, embryology, biogeography, and selective breeding. First, species were not fixed. The biological world was not static, but constantly changing. Living species had ancestors that looked different. Extinct species in the fossil record were not separate creations, but ancestors of modern forms. Second, all life shared common ancestry. The similarities among organisms, the fact that human arms, whale flippers, and bat wings share the same bone structure, reflected descent from common ancestors, not separate designs. Life was a branching tree, with all organisms ultimately related. Third, the mechanism was natural selection. Organisms varied. Some variations provided advantages in survival or reproduction. Those organisms left more offspring. Over generations, advantageous variations accumulated while disadvantageous ones disappeared. This process, operating over immense periods of time, could produce extraordinary change. Fourth, evolution worked gradually. There were no sudden leaps, no miraculous transformations. Change was slow, accumulating over thousands and millions of generations. This required vast amounts of time that geology was just beginning to recognize Earth's history provided. Darwin was careful. He didn't directly discuss human evolution in the origin, though the implications were obvious. He presented mountains of evidence but acknowledged gaps. The fossil record was incomplete. The mechanism of inheritance wasn't understood. Some organs seemed too complex to have evolved gradually. But the overall case was powerful. The evidence for evolution by natural selection was overwhelming. The book sold out immediately, surprising even Darwin's publisher, John Murray. A second edition of 3,000 copies appeared in January 1860 and also sold quickly. The Origin became a bestseller, though many who bought it struggled with its dense arguments and extensive detail. The scientific response was mixed. Some prominent scientists embraced Darwin's theory immediately. Thomas Huxley, who would become Darwin's most aggressive defender, supposedly said, "How extremely stupid not to have thought of that." Upon reading it, others were more cautious, wanting more evidence or questioning specific mechanisms. The religious response ranged from acceptance to horror. Some clergy found ways to reconcile evolution with their faith, seeing natural selection as God's method of creation. Others viewed it as atheistic materialism that reduced humans to mere animals and eliminated any need for divine purpose. The famous debate came in June 1860 at Oxford, where Huxley debated Bishop Samuel Wilberforce. According to legend, Wilberforce sarcastically asked whether Huxley claimed descent from an ape on his grandfather's or grandmother's side. Huxley replied he would rather be descended from an ape than from a man who used his gifts to obscure truth. The story is probably exaggerated, but it captured the cultural battle that was beginning. Darwin's theory challenged more than just the creation account in Genesis. It challenged fundamental assumptions about nature, purpose, and humanity's place in the cosmos. Before Darwin, the dominant view was that species were fixed, designed by God for specific purposes, arranged in a hierarchy with humans at the top. Nature showed evidence of benevolent design. The eye's complexity, the bird's wing, the orchid's beauty all pointed to a designer. Life had purpose and direction. Darwin's theory eliminated the need for that designer, at least for explaining life's diversity. Complex organs could arise through gradual modification. Beautiful adaptations reflected successful survival strategies, not aesthetic choices. There was no inherent purpose or direction to evolution, just reproduction, variation, and selection operating over time. Some found this liberating, others found it horrifying. The social implications were immediately appropriated and misused. Social Darwinism applied natural selection to human societies, arguing that competition between individuals, races, or nations reflected natural law. The wealthy and powerful had succeeded in the struggle for existence. Helping the poor interfered with natural selection. This was a gross misuse of Darwin's ideas. Darwin himself never advocated such views, but it showed how scientific theories could be weaponized for political purposes. The implications for human dignity were profound. If humans were just one species among millions, products of the same blind processes that produced beetles and bacteria, what made us special? Religious and philosophical traditions had placed humans at the center of creation, with unique souls and moral status. Darwin's theory seemed to demolish that special status. Finding new foundations for human dignity and morality in an evolved world became a central challenge. Despite early controversies, Darwin's basic insights were validated and extended by subsequent discoveries. The fossil record, incomplete in Darwin's time, has since revealed numerous transitional forms, fish evolving into amphibians, reptiles into mammals, land mammals into whales. These fossils show exactly the gradual transitions Darwin predicted. Genetics, unknown to Darwin, provided the mechanism of inheritance he lacked. DNA explained how variations arose through mutations and how they were passed on. Modern evolutionary synthesis combined Darwin's natural selection with genetics, strengthening the theory enormously. Molecular biology revealed the unity of life at the deepest level. All organisms use the same genetic code, the same basic biochemistry. This molecular evidence for common ancestry is even more compelling than anatomical similarities. Direct observation of evolution became possible. Scientists have watched bacteria evolve antibiotic resistance, observed new species forming, and tracked evolutionary changes in real time. Evolution isn't just about the past. It's an ongoing process we can study directly. Today, evolution is as foundational to biology as gravity is to physics. No serious biologist questions whether evolution occurs. The debates are about mechanisms, rates, and details, not about whether it happens. As the geneticist Theodosius Dobzhansky wrote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." Yet 166 years after the Origins publication, evolution remains controversial in American culture in ways it isn't in most other developed nations. Polls consistently show that a significant minority of Americans reject evolution, believing instead that God created humans in their present form within the last 10,000 years. This isn't primarily about the science. The evidence for evolution is overwhelming. It's about what evolution means for religious belief, for morality, for human specialness. The battles over teaching evolution in schools have continued for a century. The 1925 Scopes trial prohibited teaching evolution in Tennessee public schools. In the 1980s, creation science, tried to mandate teaching biblical creation alongside evolution. In the 2000s, the concept of intelligent design argued that complexity in nature required a designer. Courts have repeatedly ruled these efforts unconstitutional violations of church-state separation, but the controversies continue. The resistance to evolution reflects several factors. For some, it's biblical literalism. If the Bible says God created species separately, then evolution must be wrong. For others, it's about human dignity. Evolution seems to reduce humans to animals, eliminating our special status. For still others, it's distrust of scientific authority and elite institutions. This last factor has become more prominent. Resistance to evolution is now tied to broader cultural divides: urban versus rural, educated versus populist, coastal versus heartland. Evolution isn't just a scientific question, it's a marker of tribal identity, a symbol of whose worldview will prevail. Many objections to evolution rest on misunderstandings about what the theory actually claims. Evolution is not random. Natural selection is the opposite of random. It systematically preserves variations that improve survival and reproduction. Mutations may be random, but the selection process is very much not. Evolution doesn't claim humans descended from modern apes. It claims humans and modern apes share common ancestors. We're cousins, not parent and child. That common ancestor lived millions of years ago and looked different from any modern ape or human. Evolution doesn't explain the origin of life, only its diversification. How the first living cells arose is a separate question, abiogenesis, that Darwin didn't address and that remains an area of active research. Evolution doesn't eliminate God, at least not necessarily. Many religious believers accept evolution as God's method of creation. Darwin's theory explains how life diversified. It doesn't address the ultimate questions of meaning, purpose, or why there's something rather than nothing. Evolution doesn't make morality impossible. Evolutionary explanations for moral behaviors don't eliminate moral obligations any more than understanding the neuroscience of love makes love less real or valuable. These misunderstandings persist partly because evolution is rarely taught well. Many students learn it as a collection of facts rather than as an elegant theory supported by multiple lines of evidence. They understand that evolution happened, but not how we know or why it matters. Understanding evolution isn't just about the past. It's essential for addressing current challenges. Medicine relies on evolutionary biology. Antibiotic resistance is evolution in action. Cancer is an evolution within bodies. Understanding how viruses evolve helps us fight pandemics. Evolutionary medicine is revolutionizing how we understand and treat disease. Agriculture and conservation depend on evolution. Breeding better crops, understanding pest resistance, and preserving endangered species all require evolutionary thinking. Climate change forces species to adapt or die. Understanding evolution helps us predict and manage those changes. Technology increasingly uses evolutionary principles. Genetic algorithms that evolve solutions to complex problems, computer programs that improve through selection, drug designs that evolve toward optimal forms. Evolution has become an engineering tool. Yet our cultural struggles with evolution may be hampering scientific literacy just when we need it most. If students learn to distrust scientific consensus on evolution, they may distrust it on climate change, vaccines, or other issues where scientific understanding matters. The evolution controversy isn't just about biology, it's about whether we can build social consensus around scientific findings that challenge existing beliefs. Perhaps the deepest question Darwin's book poses is how we integrate scientific understanding with meaning and values. Science tells us how things work, how they came to be, and what mechanisms operate. But it doesn't tell us what we should value, what gives life meaning, or how we should treat each other. Evolution explains our origins but doesn't prescribe our purposes. Many people find meaning and beauty in the evolutionary story itself, the fact that all living things are related, that we're part of an unbroken chain of life stretching back billions of years, that the same forces that shaped ancient bacteria also shaped us. There's grandeur, as Darwin wrote in the Origin's final paragraph, in this view of life. Others find evolution threatening to meaning, worried that if we're just evolved animals, life loses purpose or dignity. This reflects a false choice. Evolution explains our biological history. It doesn't determine our values. We can be products of natural processes and still choose to live by principles of compassion, justice, and love. The challenge is holding both truths. We are biological organisms shaped by evolution, and we are beings capable of transcending our biological programming through culture, reason, and choice. Understanding where we came from doesn't limit where we can go. Thank you for joining me today on the Daily History Chronicle. As philosopher George Santayana reminds us, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Today we explored how Darwin's Origin of Species revolutionized our understanding of life, while sparking controversies that persist 166 years later, reminding us that scientific discoveries don't just change what we know, but challenge who we think we are, and that integrating new scientific understanding with meaning and values remains one of humanity's great ongoing challenges. The question isn't whether evolution occurred, the evidence is overwhelming, but how we teach it, how we reconcile it with other ways of understanding ourselves, and whether we can build scientific literacy while respecting the more profound human need for meaning and purpose. Until tomorrow, may your day be enriched by the lessons of history.